Hey there, folks. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of Myanmar, a country located in Southeast Asia. Myanmar, also known as Burma, has a rich history and culture that spans thousands of years. Etymology: the name Myanmar comes from the Sanskrit word Maharajana, meaning the land of the great kings. History: Myanmar has been inhabited for over 20,000 years, with evidence of human settlements dating back to the Stone Age. It was ruled by various kingdoms before becoming a British colony in the 19th century. Geography: Myanmar is the largest country in mainland Southeast Asia, bordered by China, India, Bangladesh, Thailand, and Laos. It's known for its diverse landscapes, including mountains, plains, and coastal regions. Government and politics: Myanmar is a republic with a multi-party democratic system. It's currently led by the National League for Democracy, which won the 2015 general election. Economy: Myanmar has a mixed economy, with agriculture, mining, and tourism as its main sectors. It's rich in natural resources, including gems, oil, and natural gas. Demographics: Myanmar is home to over 54 million people, with over 100 ethnic groups speaking around 100 languages. Culture: Myanmar is known for its rich cultural heritage, including its ancient temples, traditional music, and cuisine. That's it for today's overview of Myanmar. Thanks for tuning in, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating facts about different countries around the world. Until next time, stay curious. Myanmar, officially the Republic of the Union of Myanmar and also referred to as Burma, the official English name until 1989, is a country in northwest Southeast Asia. It is the largest country by area in mainland Southeast Asia and has a population of about 55 million. It is bordered by India and Bangladesh to its northwest, China to its northeast, Laos and Thailand to its east and southeast, and the Andaman Sea and the Bay of Bengal to its south and southwest. The country's capital city is Naypyidaw, and its largest city is Yangon, formerly Rangoon. 17. Early civilizations in the area included the Tibeto-Burman-speaking Pyu city-states in Upper Myanmar and the Mon kingdoms in Lower Myanmar. 18. In the 9th century, the Bamar people entered the Upper Irrawaddy Valley, and following the establishment of the Pagan Kingdom in the 1050s, the Burmese language and culture and Theravada Buddhism slowly became dominant in the country. The Pagan Kingdom fell to Mongol invasions, and several warring states emerged. In the 16th century, reunified by the Taungoo dynasty, the country became the largest empire in the history of Southeast Asia for a short period. 19. The early 19th century Konbaung dynasty ruled over an area that included modern Myanmar and briefly controlled Assam, the Lushai Hills, and Manipur as well. The British East India Company seized control of the administration of Myanmar after 3 Anglo-Burmese Wars in the 19th century, and the country became a British colony. After a brief Japanese occupation, Myanmar was reconquered by the Allies. On the 4th of January 1948, Myanmar declared independence under the terms of the Burma Independence Act 1947. Myanmar's post-independence history has been checkered by continuing unrest and conflict to this day. The coup d'etat in 1960 resulted in a military dictatorship under the Burma Socialist Program Party. On the 8th of August 1988, the 8,888 uprising then resulted in a nominal transition to a multi-party system 2 years later. But the country's post-uprising military council refused to cede power, and has continued to rule the country through to the present. The country remains riven by ethnic strife among its myriad ethnic groups and has one of the world's longest-running ongoing civil wars. The United Nations and several other organizations have reported consistent and systemic human rights violations in the country. In 2011, the military junta was officially dissolved following a 2010 general election, and a nominally civilian government was installed. Aung San Suu Kyi and political prisoners were released and the 2015 Myanmar general election was held, leading to improved foreign relations and eased economic sanctions. 21. Although the country's treatment of its ethnic minorities, particularly in connection with the Rohingya conflict, continued to be a source of international tension and consternation. Following the 2020 Myanmar general election, in which Aung San Suu Kyi's party won a clear majority in both houses, the Burmese military Tatmadaw again seized power in a coup d'etat. 23. The coup, which was widely condemned by the international community, led to continuous ongoing widespread protests in Myanmar and has been marked by violent political repression by the military, as well as a larger outbreak of the civil war. 20 For the military also arrested Aung San Suu Kyi in order to remove her from public life and charge her with crimes ranging from corruption to violation of COVID-19 protocols. All of the charges against her are politically motivated, according to independent observers. 25. Myanmar is a member of the East Asia Summit, Non-Aligned Movement, ASEAN, and BIMSTEC, but it is not a member of the Commonwealth of Nations despite once being part of the British Empire. Myanmar is a dialogue partner of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The country is very rich in natural resources, such as jade, gens, oil, natural gas, teak and other minerals, as well as endowed with renewable energy, having the highest solar power potential compared to other countries of the Great Mekong subregion. 26. However, Myanmar has long suffered from instability, factional violence, corruption, poor infrastructure, as well as a long history of colonial exploitation with little regard to human development. 27. In 2013, its GDP nominal stood at $56.7 billion United States dollars and its GDP PPP at $221.5 billion United States dollars. 28. The income gap in Myanmar is among the widest in the world, as a large proportion of the economy is controlled by cronies of the military junta. 29. Myanmar is one of the least developed countries, 16 since 2021. More than 600,000 people have been displaced across Myanmar due to the civil war post-coup, with more than 3 million people in dire need of humanitarian assistance. 30. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees UNHCR, there are over 1.3 million people counted as refugees and asylum seekers, and 3.5 million people displaced internally as of December 2024. 31. Etymology. Main article. Names of Myanmar. The name of the country has been a matter of dispute and disagreement, particularly in the early 21st century, focusing mainly on the political legitimacy of those using Myanmar versus Burma. 30 to 33. Both names derive from the earlier Burmese Mranma or Mrama, an ethnonym for the majority Burman ethnic group, of uncertain etymology. 34. The terms are also popularly thought to derive from Sanskrit Brahma Desha, land of Brahma. 35. In 1989, the military government officially changed the English translations of many names dating back to Burma's colonial period or earlier, including that of the country itself. Burma became Myanmar. The renaming remains a contested issue. 36. Many political and ethnic opposition groups and countries continue to use Burma because they do not recognize the legitimacy or authority of the military government. 37. The country's official full name is Republic of the Union of Myanmar Burmese, Paiton Sathamata Myanmar Nanganta, pronounced Pijata Theta Amimida and Jama no Gadu. Countries that do not officially recognize that name use the long form Union of Burma instead. 1738. In English, the country is popularly known as either Burma or Myanmar. In Burmese, the pronunciation depends on the register used and is either Bama pronounced Bama or Myanmar pronounced Myanmar. 36. Official United States foreign policy retains Burma as the country's name, although the State Department's website lists the country as Burma Myanmar. 39. The United Nations uses Myanmar, as does the ASEAN and as do Australia. 40. Russia, Germany. 41. China, India, Bangladesh, Norway. 42. Japan. 43. Switzerland. 40 for Canada. 45. And Ukraine. 46. Most English-speaking international news media refer to the country by the name Myanmar, including to BBC, 47 CNN, 48 Al Jazeera, 49 Reuters, 50 and the Australian Broadcasting Corporation ABC, Radio Australia. 51. Myanmar is known by a name deriving from Burma in Spanish, Italian, Romanian, and Greek. 52. French-language media consistently use Burmese. 53-54. There are at least 9 different pronunciations of the English name Myanmar, and no single one is standard. Pronunciations with 2 syllables are found most often in major British and American dictionaries. Pronunciations 1 dictionaries such as Collins and other sources also report pronunciations with 3 syllables, pronunciations to 55. As John Wells explains, the English spellings of both Myanmar and Burma assume a non-rhotic variety of English, in which the letter R before a consonant or finally serves merely to indicate a long vowel, Mun Man, BB me. So the pronunciation of the last syllable of Myanmar is MDR by some speakers in the UK and most speakers in North America is in fact a spelling pronunciation based on a misunderstanding of non-rhotic spelling conventions. However, Burma is pronounced Burmum by rhotic speakers of English due to a phonotactic constraint, as A occurs only before per R. In those accents, prehistory, main articles, prehistory of Myanmar and migration period of ancient Burma. 2 city-states, c. 8th century. Archaeological evidence shows that Homo erectus lived in the region now known as Myanmar as early as 750,000 years ago, with no more erectus finds after ago. 56. The first evidence of Homo sapiens is dated to about 25,000 BP with discoveries of stone tools in central Myanmar. 57. Evidence of Neolithic age domestication of plants and animals and the use of polished stone tools dating to sometime between 10,000 and 6,000 BC has been discovered in the form of cave paintings in Patalin caves. 58. The Bronze Age arrived c. 1500 BCE when people in the region were turning copper into bronze, growing rice and domesticating poultry and pigs. They were among the first people in the world to do so. 59 human remains and artifacts from this era were discovered in Maniwa district in the Iron Age began around 500 BCE with the emergence of iron-working settlements in an area south of present-day Mandalay. 61. Evidence also shows the presence of rice-growing settlements of large villages and small towns that traded with their surroundings as far as China between 500 BC and 200 CE. 62. Iron Age Burmese cultures also had influences from outside sources such as India and Thailand, as seen in their funerary practices concerning child burials. This indicates some form of communication between groups in Myanmar and other places, possibly through trade. 63. Early city-states, main articles, 2 city-states and Mon kingdoms. Around the 2nd century BC the first known city-states emerged in central Myanmar. The city-states were founded as part of the southward migration by the Tibeto-Burman-speaking Pyu people, the earliest inhabitants of Myanmar of whom records are extant from present-day Yunnan. 64. The Pyu culture was heavily influenced by trade with India, importing Buddhism as well as other cultural, architectural and political concepts, which would have an enduring influence on later Burmese culture and political organization. 65. By the 9th century, several city-states had sprouted across the land, the Pyu in the central dry zone, Mon along the southern coastline and Arakanese along the western littoral. The balance was upset when the Pyu came under repeated attacks from Nanjao between the 750s and the 830s. In the mid to late 9th century, the Bamar people founded a small settlement at Bagan. It was one of several competing city-states until the late 10th century, when it grew in authority and grandeur. 66. Pagan Kingdom, main articles, Pagan Kingdom, Taungoo dynasty, and Konbaung dynasty. See also, Kingdom of Ava, Irrawaddy Kingdom, Kingdom of Maraku, and Shan states. Tagodas and Kyauns in present-day Bagan, the capital of the Pagan Kingdom. Pagan gradually grew to absorb its surrounding states until the 1050s-1060s, when Irrawaddy founded the Pagan Kingdom, the first ever unification of the Irrawaddy Valley and its periphery. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the Pagan Empire and the Khmer Empire were 2 main powers in mainland Southeast Asia. 67. The Burmese language and culture gradually became dominant in the Upper Irrawaddy Valley, eclipsing the Pyu, Mon and Pali norms, clarification needed by the late 12th century. 68. Theravada Buddhism slowly began to spread to the village level, although Tantric, Mahayana, Hinduism, and folk religion remained heavily entrenched. Pagan's rulers and wealthy built over 10,000 Buddhist temples in the pagan capital zone alone. Repeated Mongol invasions in the late 13th century toppled a 4-century-old kingdom in 1287. 68. Temples at Maraku. Pagan's collapse was followed by 250 years of political fragmentation that lasted well into the 16th century. Like the Burmans for centuries earlier, Shan migrants who arrived with the Mongol invasions stayed behind. Several competing Shan states came to dominate the entire northwestern to eastern arc surrounding the Irrawaddy Valley. The valley too was beset with petty states until the late 14th century, when two sizable powers, Ava Kingdom and Hanthawaddy Kingdom, emerged. In the west, a politically fragmented Arakan was under competing influences of its stronger neighbors until the Kingdom of Merauke unified the Arakan coastline for the first time in 1437. The kingdom was a protectorate of the Bengal Sultanate at different time periods. 69. In the 14th and 15th centuries, Ava fought wars of unification, but could never quite reassemble the lost empire. Having held off Ava, the Mon-speaking Hanthawaddy entered its golden age, and Arakan went on to become a power in its own right for the next 350 years. In contrast, constant warfare left Ava greatly weakened, and it slowly disintegrated from 1481 onward. In 1527, the Confederation of Shan states conquered Ava and ruled Upper Myanmar until 1555. Like the Pagan Empire, Ava, Hanthawaddy and the Shan states were all multi-ethnic polities. Despite the wars, cultural synchronization continued. This period is considered a golden age for Burmese culture. Burmese literature grew more confident, popular, and stylistically diverse, and the second generation of Burmese law codes, as well as the earliest Pan-Burma chronicles emerge. 70 Hanthawaddy monarchs introduced religious reforms that later spread to the rest of the country. 71. Taungoo and Konbaung. Main article: Burmese-Portuguese conflicts. Portuguese ruler mounting an elephant and his soldiers. Phillips, Jan Casper draftsman and engraver. Taungoo Empire under Bayanan in 1580. Myanmar delegates in Peking in 1761. At the time of Emperor Qianlong, political unification returned in the mid-16th century through the efforts of Taungoo, a former vassal state of Ava. Taungoo's young, ambitious king Taban Shwethi defeated the more powerful Hanthawaddy in the Taungoo-Hanthawaddy War. His successor Bayanan went on to conquer a vast swath of mainland Southeast Asia including the Shan states, Lan Na, Manipur, Munmau, the Ayutthaya Kingdom, Lanchong and southern Arakan. However, the largest empire in the history of Southeast Asia unraveled soon, after Bayanan's death in 1581, completely collapsing by 1599. Ayutthaya seized Tenasserim and Lan Na, and Portuguese mercenaries established Portuguese rule at Thanley in Syria. The dynasty regrouped and defeated the Portuguese in 1613 and Siam in 1614. It restored a smaller, more manageable kingdom, encompassing Lower Myanmar, Upper Myanmar, Shan states, Lan Na and Upper Tenasserim. The restored Taungoo kings created a legal and political framework whose basic features continued well into the 19th century. The crown completely replaced the hereditary chieftainships with appointed governorships in the entire Irrawaddy Valley and greatly reduced the hereditary rights of Shan chiefs. Its trade and secular administrative reforms built a prosperous economy for more than 80 years. From the 1720s onward, the kingdom was beset with repeated Meitei raids into Upper Myanmar and a nagging rebellion in Lan Na. In 1740, the Mon of Lower Myanmar founded the restored Hanthawaddy Kingdom. Hanthawaddy forces sacked Ava in 1752, ending the 266-year-old Taungoo dynasty. A British 1825 lithograph of Shwedagon Pagoda shows British occupation during the First Anglo-Burmese War. After the fall of Ava, the Konbaung-Hanthawaddy War involved one resistance group under Along Phaya defeating the restored Hanthawaddy, and by 1759 he had reunited all of Myanmar and Manipur and driven out the French and the British, who had provided arms to Hanthawaddy. By 1770, Along Phaya's heirs had subdued much of Laos and Pha, and won the Burmese-Siamese War against Ayutthaya, and the Sino-Burmese War against Qing China, 72. With Burma preoccupied by the Chinese threat, Ayutthaya recovered its territories by 1770 and went on to capture Lan Na by 1776. Burma and Siam went to war until 1855, but all resulted in a stalemate, exchanging Tenasserim to Burma and Lan Na to Ayutthaya. Faced with a powerful China and a resurgent Ayutthaya in the east, King Bada Phaya turned west, acquiring Arakan 1785, Manipur 1814, and Assam 1817. It was the second largest empire in Burmese history, but also one with a long ill-defined border with British India, 73. In 1826, Burma lost Arakan, Manipur, Assam and Tenasserim to the British in the First Anglo-Burmese War. In 1852, the British easily seized Lower Burma in the Second Anglo-Burmese War. King Mindon Min tried to modernize the kingdom and in 1875 narrowly avoided annexation by ceding the Karenni states to British, alarmed by the consolidation of French Indochina, annexed the remainder of the country in the Third Anglo-Burmese War in 1885. Konbaung kings extended restored Taungoo's administrative reforms and achieved unprecedented levels of internal control and external expansion. For the first time in history, the Burmese language and culture came to predominate the entire Irrawaddy Valley. The evolution and growth of Burmese literature and theater continue, aided by an extremely high adult male literacy rate for the year, half of all males and 5% of females, 74. Nonetheless, the extent and pace of reforms were uneven and ultimately proved insufficient to stem the advance of British colonialism. British Burma 1885 to 1948. Main articles: British rule in Burma and Burma campaign. The landing of British forces in Mandalay after the last of the Anglo-Burmese Wars, which resulted in the abdication of the last Burmese monarch, King Thibaw-Min. British troops firing a mortar on the Machi Road, July 1944. In the 19th century, Burmese rulers sought to maintain their traditional influence in the western areas of Assam, Manipur and Arakan. Pressing them, however, was the British East India Company, which was expanding its interests eastwards over the same territory. Over the next 60 years, diplomacy, raids, treaties and compromises, known collectively as the Anglo-Burmese Wars, continued until Britain proclaimed control over most of Burma. 75. With the fall of Mandalay, all of Burma came under British rule, being annexed on the 1st of January 1886. Throughout the colonial era, many Indians arrived as soldiers, civil servants, construction workers and traders and, along with the Anglo-Burmese community, dominated commercial and civil life in Burma. Rangoon became the capital of British Burma and an important port between Calcutta and Singapore. Burmese resentment was strong and was vented in violent riots that periodically paralyzed Rangoon until the 1930s. 76. Some of the discontent was caused by a disrespect for Burmese culture and traditions. Buddhist monks became the vanguards of the independence movement. U Wisara, an activist monk, died in prison after a 166-day hunger strike. 77. On the 1st of April 1937, Burma became a separately administered colony of Britain, and Bamar became the first Prime Minister and Premier of Burma. Bamar was an outspoken advocate for Burmese self-rule, and he opposed the participation of Britain, and by extension Burma, in World War II. He resigned from the Legislative Assembly and was arrested for sedition. In 1940, before Japan formally entered the war, Hun Sen formed the Burma Independence Army in Japan. As a major battleground, Burma was devastated during World War II by the Japanese invasion. Within months after they entered the war, Japanese troops had advanced on Rangoon, and the British administration had collapsed. A Burmese executive administration headed by Bamar was established by the Japanese in August 1942. Wingate's British Chindits were formed into long-range penetration groups trained to operate deep behind Japanese lines. 78. A similar American unit, Merrill's Marauders, followed the Chindits into the Burmese jungle in 1943. 79. Beginning in late 1944, Allied troops launched a series of offensives that led to the end of Japanese rule in July 1945. The battles were intense with much of Burma laid waste by the fighting. Overall, the Japanese lost some 150,000 men in Burma with 1,700 prisoners taken. 80. Although many Burmese fought initially for the Japanese as part of the Burma Independence Army, many Burmese, mostly from the ethnic minorities, served in the British Burma Army. 81. The Burma National Army and the Arakan National Army fought with the Japanese from 1940 to 1944 but switched allegiance to the Allied side in 1945. Overall, 170,000 to 250,000 Burmese civilians died during World War II. 82. Following World War II, Hun Sen negotiated the Panglong Agreement with ethnic leaders that guaranteed the independence of Myanmar as a unified state. Aung San Y. Pekin, Bo Muang, Sir Maungi, Sanya Maun, Myomayu and Kaiwei were among the negotiators of the historic Panglong Conference negotiated with Bamar leader General Aung San and other ethnic leaders in 1947. In 1947, Aung San became deputy chairman of the Executive Council of Myanmar, a transitional government. But in July 1947, political rivals 83 assassinated Aung San and several cabinet members. 84. Independence 1948 to 1962. Main article: Post-Independence Burma 1948 to 1962. See also Independence Day Myanmar. On the 4th of January 1948, the nation became an independent republic under the terms of the Burma Independence Act 1947. The new country was named the Union of Burma, with Sao Shui Take as its first president and U Nu as its first prime minister. Unlike most other former British colonies and overseas territories, Burma did not become a member of the Commonwealth. A bicameral parliament was formed, consisting of a Chamber of Deputies and a Chamber of Nationalities. 85 and multi-party elections were held in 1951, 1952, 1956 and 1960. The geographical area Burma encompasses today can be traced to the Panglong Agreement, which combined Burma proper, which consisted of Lower Burma and Upper Burma, and the frontier areas, which had been administered separately by the British. 86. In 1961, U Thant, the Union of Burma's permanent representative to the United Nations and former secretary to the Prime Minister, was elected Secretary General of the United Nations, a position he held for 10 years. 87. When the non-Burman ethnic groups pushed for autonomy or federalism, alongside having a weak civilian government at the center, the military leadership staged a coup d'etat in 1962. Though incorporated in the 1947 Constitution, successive military governments construed the use of the term federalism as being anti-national, anti-unity and pro-disintegration. 88. Military rule 1960 to 2011. On the 2nd of March 1962, the military led by General Anewin took control of Burma through a coup d'etat, and the government had been under direct or indirect control of the military since then. Between 1962 and 1974, Myanmar was ruled by a revolutionary council headed by the general. Almost all aspects of society, business, media, production were nationalized or brought under government control under the Burmese way to socialism. 89, which combined Soviet-style nationalization and central planning. A new constitution of the Socialist Republic of the Union of Burma was adopted in 1974. Until 1988, the country was ruled as a one-party system, with the general and other military officers resigning and ruling through the Burma Socialist Program Party BSPP. 90. During this period, Myanmar became one of the world's most impoverished countries. 91. There were sporadic protests against military rule during the Anewin years, and these were almost always violently suppressed. On the 7th of July 1962, the government broke up demonstrations at Rangoon University, killing 15 students. 89. In 1974, the military violently suppressed anti-government protests at the funeral of U Thant. Student protests in 1975, 1976, and 1977 were quickly suppressed by overwhelming force. 90. In 1988, unrest over economic mismanagement and political oppression by the government led to widespread pro-democracy demonstrations throughout the country known as the 8,888 Uprising. Security forces killed thousands of demonstrators, and General Sam Maung staged a coup d'etat and formed the State Law and Order Restoration Council SLORC. In 1989, SLORC declared martial law after widespread protests. The military government finalized plans for People's Assembly elections on the 31st of May 1989. 90. SLORC changed the country's official English name from the Socialist Republic of the Union of Burma to the Union of Myanmar on the 18th of June 1989 by enacting the adaptation of the expression law. In May 1990, the government held free multi-party elections for the first time in almost 30 years, and the National League for Democracy (NLD), the party of Aung San Suu Kyi, won 93, earning 392 out of a total 492 seats, i.e., 80% of the seats. However, the military junta refused to cede power 94 and continued to rule the nation, first as SLORC and, from 1997, as the State Peace and Development Council SPDC until its dissolution in March 2011. General Than Shwe took over the chairmanship, effectively the position of Myanmar's top ruler, from General Sam Maung in 1992 and held it until 2011. 95. On the 23rd of June 1997, Myanmar was admitted into the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. On the 27th of March 2006, the military junta, which had moved the national capital from Yangon to a site near Myanmar in November 2005, officially named the new capital Naypyidaw, meaning City of the Kings, 96. Protesters in Yangon during the 2007 Saffron Revolution with a banner that reads Nonviolence, National Movement in Burmese. In the background is Shwedagon Pagoda, Cyclone Nargis in southern Myanmar, May 2008. In August 2007, an increase in the price of fuel led to the Saffron Revolution led by Buddhist monks that were dealt with harshly by the government. 97 The government cracked down on them on the 26th of September 2007, with reports of barricades at the Shwedagon Pagoda and monks killed. There were also rumors of disagreement within the Burmese armed forces, but none was confirmed. The military crackdown against unarmed protesters was widely condemned as part of the international reactions to the Saffron Revolution and led to an increase in economic sanctions against the Burmese government. In May 2008, Cyclone Nargis caused extensive damage in the densely populated rice farming delta of the Irrawaddy division, 98. It was the worst natural disaster in Burmese history with reports of an estimated 200,000 people dead or missing. Damages totaled to $10 billion, and as many as 1 million were left homeless, 99 in the critical days following this disaster. Myanmar's isolationist government was accused of hindering United Nations recovery efforts. 100 humanitarian aid was requested, but concerns about foreign military or intelligence presence in the country delayed the entry of United States military planes delivering medicine, food, and other supplies. 101. In early August 2009, a conflict broke out in Shan State in northern Myanmar. For several weeks, junta troops fought against ethnic minorities including the Han Chinese, 100 to Washington, and Kachin, 103-104. During the 8th to the 12th of August, the first days of the conflict, as many as 10,000 Burmese civilians fled to Yunnan in neighboring China, 103-100-105. Civil Wars. Main article. Internal conflict in Myanmar. Civil wars have been a constant feature of Myanmar's socio-political landscape since the attainment of independence in 1948. These wars are predominantly struggles for ethnic and subnational autonomy, with the areas surrounding the ethnically Bamar central districts of the country serving as the primary geographical setting of conflict. Foreign journalists and visitors require a special travel permit to visit the areas in which Myanmar civil wars continue. 106. In October 2012, the ongoing conflicts in Myanmar included the Kachin conflict, 107 between the pro-Christian Kachin Independence Army and the government. 108 a civil war between the Rohingya Muslims, 109 and the government and non-government groups in Rakhine State. 110 and a conflict between the Shan, 111 Lahu, and Karen 112-113 minority groups, and the government in the eastern half of the country. In addition, Al-Qaeda signaled an intention to become involved in Myanmar. 114. Armed conflict between ethnic Chinese rebels and the Myanmar armed forces resulted in the Kokang offensive in February 2015. The conflict had forced 40,000 to 50,000 civilians to flee their homes and seek shelter on the Chinese side of the border. 115. During the incident, the government of China was accused of giving military assistance to the ethnic Chinese rebels. 116 clashes between Burmese troops and local insurgent groups have continued, fueling tensions between China and Myanmar. 117. Period of liberalization, 2011 to 2021. See also, 2011 to 2015 Myanmar political reforms. The military-backed government had promulgated a roadmap to discipline flourishing democracy in 1993, but the process appeared to stall several times until 2008 when the government published a new draft national constitution and organized a flawed national referendum which adopted it. The new constitution provided for election of a national assembly with powers to appoint a president while practically ensuring army control at all levels. 118. U.S. President Barack Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton with Aung San Suu Kyi and her staff at her home in Yangon. 2012. A general election in 2010, the first for 20 years, was boycotted by the NLD. The military-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party declared victory, stating that it had been favored by 80% of the votes. Fraud, however, was alleged. 119-120. A nominally civilian government was then formed, with retired General Thein Sein as president. 121. A series of liberalizing political and economic actions, or reforms, then took place. By the end of 2011, these included the release of pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi from house arrest, the establishment of the National Human Rights Commission, the granting of general amnesties for more than 200 political prisoners, new labor laws that permitted labor unions and strikes, a relaxation of press censorship, and the regulation of currency practices. 122. In response, United States Secretary of State Hillary Clinton visited Myanmar in December 2011, the first visit by a U.S. Secretary of State in more than 50 years. 123. Meeting both President Thein Sein and opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi. 124. Aung San Suu Kyi's NLD party participated in the 2012 by-elections, facilitated by the government's abolition of the laws that previously barred it. 125. In the April 2012 by-elections, the NLD won 43 of the 45 available seats. The 2012 by-elections were also the first time that international representatives were allowed to monitor the voting process in Myanmar. 126. Myanmar's improved international reputation was indicated by ASEAN's approval of Myanmar's bid for the position of ASEAN chair in 2014. 127. Map of Myanmar and its divisions. 2015 general elections. General elections were held on the 8th of November 2015. These were the first openly contested elections held in Myanmar since the 1990 general election, which was annulled. 128. The results gave the NLD an absolute majority of seats in both chambers of the national parliament, enough to ensure that its candidate would become president. While NLD leader Aung San Suu Kyi is constitutionally barred from the presidency. 128-129. The new parliament convened on the 1st of February 2016. 130 and on the 15th of March 2016, Deng Kyo was elected as the first non-military president since the military coup of 1962. 131. On the 6th of April 2016, Aung San Suu Kyi assumed the newly created role of state councillor, a role akin to a prime minister. 132. Coup d'état and civil war. Main articles. 2021 Myanmar coup d'état and Myanmar civil war. 2021 present. See also Myanmar protests 2021 present. In Myanmar's 2020 parliamentary election, the ostensibly ruling National League for Democracy (NLD), the party of state councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, competed with various other smaller parties, particularly the military-affiliated Union Solidarity and Development Party (USDP). 133 Suu Kyi's NLD on the 2020 Myanmar general election on the 8th of November in a landslide. 133-130 for 135. The USDP, regarded as a proxy for the military, suffered a humiliating defeat. 136-137, even worse than in 2015. 137, capturing only 33 of the 476 elected seats. 135-136. As the election results began emerging, the USDP rejected them, urging a new election with the military as observers. 133-137. More than 90 other smaller parties contested the vote, including more than 15 who could. However, election observers declared there were no major irregularities. 136-135-138. However, despite the election commission validating the NLD's overwhelming victory, 138 the USDP and Myanmar's military persistently alleged fraud. 139, 140, 141, 140 to 143 excessive citations. In January 2021, just before the new parliament was to be sworn in, the NLD announced that Suu Kyi would retain her state councillor role in the upcoming government. 144. Protesters against the military coup in Myanmar. In the early morning of the 1st of February 2021, the day parliament was set to convene, the Tatmadaw, Myanmar's military, detained Suu Kyi and other members of the ruling party. 136-23-145 The military handed power to military chief Min Nong Hlaing and declared a state of emergency for 1 year 146-23 and began closing the borders, restricting travel and electronic communications nationwide. The military announced it would replace the existing election commission with a new one, and a military media outlet indicated new elections would be held in about 1 year, though the military avoided making an official commitment to that. 145. The military expelled NLD party members of parliament from the capital city, Naypyidaw. 145. By the 15th of March 2021, the military leadership continued to extend martial law into more parts of Yangon, while security forces killed 38 people in a single day of violence. 147. By the second day of the coup, thousands of protesters were marching in the streets of Yangon, and other protests erupted nationwide, largely halting commerce and transportation. Despite the military's arrests and killings of protesters, the first weeks of the coup found growing public participation, including groups of civil servants, teachers, students, workers, monks and religious leaders, even normally disaffected ethnic minorities. 148, 149, 145. The coup was immediately condemned by the United Nations Secretary-General and leaders of democratic nations. The U.S. threatened sanctions on the military and its leaders, including a freeze of $1 billion United States dollars of their assets in the U.S. 148, 145. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Russia, Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines and China refrained from criticizing the military coup. 150, 151, 150 to 153. A United Nations Security Council resolution called for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi and the other detained leaders. 148, 145. A position shared by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. 145. International development and aid partners, business, non-governmental, and governmental, hinted at suspension of partnerships with Myanmar. Banks were closed and social media communications platforms, including Facebook and Twitter, removed Tatmadaw postings. Protesters appeared at Myanmar embassies in foreign countries. 148, 145. The National Unity Government then declared the formation of an armed wing on the 5th of May 2021, a date that is often cited as the start of a full-scale civil war. This armed wing was named the People's Defense Force (PDF) to protect its supporters from military junta attacks and as a first step towards a federal union army. The civil war is ongoing as of 2025. 150 for 155. 23. Geography. Main article, Geography of Myanmar. Myanmar has a total area of 678,500 square kilometers to 262,000 square miles. It lies between latitudes 9 and 29 and longitudes 92 and 102. Myanmar is bordered in the northwest by the Chittagong division of Bangladesh and the Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh states of India. Its north and northeast border is with the Tibet Autonomous Region and Yunnan for a Sino-Myanmar border total of 2,185 kilometers, 1,358 miles. It is bounded by Laos and Thailand to the southeast. Myanmar has 1,930 kilometers, 1,200 miles of contiguous coastline along the Bay of Bengal and Andaman Sea to the southwest and the south, which forms 1/4 of its total perimeter. 17. In the north, the Hengduan Mountains form the border with China. Kakaabo Razi, located in Kachin State, at an elevation of 5,881 meters, 19,295 feet, is the highest point in Myanmar. 156. Many mountain ranges, such as the Rakhine Yoma, the Bago Yoma, the Shan Hills and the Tenasserim Hills exist within Myanmar, all of which run north to south from the Himalayas. 157. The mountain chains divide Myanmar's 3 river systems, which are the Irrawaddy, Salween Tamuin, and the Sitong rivers. 158. The Irrawaddy River, Myanmar's longest river at nearly 2,170 kilometers, 1,348 miles, flows into the Gulf of Martaban. Fertile plains exist in the valleys between the mountain chains. 157. The majority of Myanmar's population lives in the Irrawaddy Valley, which is situated between the Rakhine Yoma and the Shan Plateau. Myanmar is one of the most seismically prone countries in the world. 159. The Sagaing Fault between the Indian Plate and the Eurasian Plate runs north-south through the center of the country. 159. There have been many small and some big earthquakes with a 7 to 8 magnitude. 159. Administrative Divisions. Main article. Administrative Divisions of Myanmar. A clickable map of Burma. Myanmar exhibiting its first-level administrative divisions. Myanmar is divided into 7 states and 7 regions, formerly called divisions. 160 regions are predominantly Bamar, that is, mainly inhabited by Myanmar's dominant ethnic group. States, in essence, are regions that are home to particular ethnic minorities. The administrative divisions are further subdivided into districts, which are further subdivided into townships, wards, and villages. Since the 30th of April 2022, districts inside regions and states have been expanded to total count of 121. 161. Below are the number of districts, townships, cities, towns, wards, village groups and villages, each division and state of Myanmar as of the 30th of April 2022. Biodiversity. Main article. Wildlife of Myanmar. The limestone landscape of Kayin State. Further information. Deforestation in Myanmar and list of protected areas of Myanmar. Myanmar is a biodiverse country with more than 16,000 plant, 314 mammal, 1,131 bird, 293 reptile, and 139 amphibian species, and 64 terrestrial ecosystems including tropical and subtropical vegetation, seasonally inundated wetlands, shoreline and tidal systems, and alpine ecosystems. Myanmar houses some of the largest intact natural ecosystems in Southeast Asia, but the remaining ecosystems are under threat from land use intensification and overexploitation. According to the IUCN Red List of Ecosystems categories and criteria, more than a third of Myanmar's land area has been converted to anthropogenic ecosystems over the last 2 to 3 centuries, and nearly half of its ecosystems are threatened. Despite large gaps in information for some ecosystems, there is a large potential to develop a comprehensive protected area network that protects its terrestrial biodiversity. 166. Myanmar continues to perform badly in the Global Environmental Performance Index (API), with an overall ranking of 153 out of 180 countries in 2016, among the worst in the South Asian region. The environmental areas where Myanmar performs worst, i.e. highest ranking, are air quality 174, health impacts of environmental issues 143, and biodiversity and habitat 142. Myanmar performs best, i.e. lowest ranking in environmental impacts of fisheries 21, but with declining fish stocks. Despite several issues, Myanmar also ranks 64 and scores very good, i.e. high percentage of 93.73% in environmental effects of the agricultural industry because of an excellent management of the nitrogen cycle. 167-168. Myanmar is one of the most highly vulnerable countries to climate change. This poses a number of social, political, economic and foreign policy challenges to the country. 169. Myanmar's slow economic growth has contributed to the preservation of much of its environment and ecosystems. Forests, including dense tropical growth and valuable teak in Lower Myanmar, cover over 49% of the country, including areas of acacia, bamboo, ironwood and magnolia champaka. Coconut and betel palm and rubber have been introduced. In the highlands of the north, oak, pine and various rhododendrons cover much of the land. 170. Heavy logging since the new 1995 forestry law went into effect has seriously reduced forest area and wildlife habitat. 171. The lands along the coast support all varieties of tropical fruits and once had large areas of mangroves, although much of the protective mangroves have disappeared. In much of central Myanmar, the dry zone, vegetation is sparse and stunted. Typical jungle animals, particularly tigers, occur sparsely in Myanmar. In Upper Myanmar, there are rhinoceros, wild water buffalo, clouded leopard, wild boars, deer, antelope, and elephants, which are also tamed or bred in captivity for use as work animals, particularly in the lumber industry. Smaller mammals are also numerous, ranging from gibbons and monkeys to flying foxes. The abundance of birds is notable with over 800 species, including parrots, myna, peafowl, red junglefowl, weaver birds, crows, herons, and barn owl. Among reptile species there are crocodiles, geckos, cobras, Burmese pythons, and turtles. Hundreds of species of freshwater fish are wide-ranging, plentiful and are very important food sources. 172. Government and politics. Head of government, deputy head of government, and acting head of state. Min Aung Hlaing, Prime Minister and Chairman of the State Administration Council. So Win, Deputy Prime Minister and Vice Chairman of the State Administration Council. Myan Sway, Acting President of Myanmar. Myanmar operates de jure as a unitary assembly independent republic under its 2008 constitution. But in February 2021, the civilian government led by Aung San Suu Kyi was deposed by the Naypyidaw. In February 2021, Myanmar military declared a one-year state emergency and first Vice President Myan Sway became the acting President of Myanmar and handed the power to the Commander-in-Chief of Defense Services, In Aung Hlaing, and he assumed the role Chairman of the State Administration Council. Then Prime Minister. The President of Myanmar acts as the de jure head of state, and the Chairman of the State Administration Council acts as the de facto head of government. 173. Assembly of the Union Paidan Suhluda. The Constitution of Myanmar, its third since independence, was drafted by its military rulers and published in September 2008. The country is governed as a parliamentary system with a bicameral legislature with an executive president accountable to the legislature, with 25% of the legislators appointed by the military and the rest elected in general elections. The legislature, called the Assembly of the Union, is bicameral and made up of two houses, the 224-seat Upper House of Nationalities and the 440-seat Lower House of Representatives. The Upper House consists 168 members who are directly elected and 56 who are appointed by the Burmese Armed Forces. The Lower House consists of 330 members who are directly elected and 110 who are appointed by the armed forces. Political culture. The major political parties are the National League for Democracy and the Union Solidarity and Development Party. Myanmar's army-drafted constitution was approved in a referendum in May 2008. The results, 92.4% of the 22 million voters, with an official turnout of 99%, are considered suspect by many international observers and by the National League of Democracy, with reports of widespread fraud, ballot stuffing, and voter intimidation. 174. The elections of 2010 resulted in a victory for the military-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party. Various foreign observers questioned the fairness of the elections. 120, 175, 176. On criticism of the election was that only government-sanctioned political parties were allowed to contest in it, and the Popular National League for Democracy was declared illegal. 177. However, immediately following the elections, the government ended the house arrest of the democracy advocate and leader of the National League for Democracy, Aung San Suu Kyi. 178. And her ability to move freely around the country is considered an important test of the military's movement toward more openness. 177. Foreign relations. Main article. Foreign relations of Myanmar. Though the country's foreign relations, particularly with Western nations, have historically been strained, the situation has markedly improved since the reforms following the 2010 elections. After years of diplomatic isolation and economic and military sanctions. 179. The United States relaxed curbs on foreign aid to Myanmar in November 2011. 124. And announced the resumption of diplomatic relations on the 13th of January 2012. 180. The European Union has placed sanctions on Myanmar, including an arms embargo, cessation of trade preferences, and suspension of all aid with the exception of humanitarian aid. 181. Sanctions imposed by the United States and European countries against the former military government, coupled with boycotts and other direct pressure on corporations by supporters of the democracy movement, have resulted in the withdrawal from the country of most U.S. and many European companies. 182. Despite Western isolation, Asian corporations have generally remained willing to continue investing in the country and to initiate new investments, particularly in natural resource extraction. The country has close relations with neighboring India and China, with several Indian and Chinese companies operating in the country. Under India's Look East policy, fields of cooperation between India and Myanmar include remote sensing, 183 oil and gas exploration, 180 for information technology, 185 hydropower, 186 and construction of ports and buildings, 187. Myanmar also has close political relations with Vietnam, 188, and Japan, 189, 190. In May 2013, Thein Sein became the first Myanmar president to visit the White House in 47 years. President Barack Obama praised the former general for political and economic reforms and the cessation of tensions between Myanmar and the United States. Political activists objected to the visit because of concerns over human rights abuses in Myanmar, but Obama assured Thein Sein that Myanmar will receive U.S. support. The two governments agreed to sign a bilateral trade and investment framework agreement on the 21st of May 2013, 191. In June 2013, Myanmar held its first ever summit, the World Economic Forum on East Asia 2013, a regional spin-off of the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The summit was held on the 5th to the 7th of June and attended by 1,200 participants, including 10 heads of state, 12 ministers and 40 senior directors from around the world, 192. On the 19th of January 2025, Reuters reported that ASEAN had told Myanmar's military government to prioritize ceasefire, urging the junta to start dialogue and end hostilities immediately and to allow unhindered humanitarian access, citing Malaysia's Foreign Minister Muhammad Hassan, 193. The ASEAN chair's statement denounced the continued acts of violence against civilians and public facilities and urged all parties involved to immediately halt indiscriminate violence, exercise utmost restraint, ensure the protection and safety of all civilians and civilian infrastructures, and create a conducive environment for the delivery of humanitarian assistance and inclusive national dialogue. 194. Military. Main article, Armed Forces of Myanmar. Since the late 1950s, Myanmar's military has had major roles in Myanmar's politics. 195. 23. A Myanmar Air Force Mikoinam IG-29 multi-role fighter. Myanmar has received extensive military aid from China in the past. 196. Myanmar has been a member of ASEAN since 1997. Though it gave up its turn to hold the ASEAN chair and host the ASEAN Summit in 2006, it chaired the forum and hosted the summit in 2014. In November 2008, Myanmar's political situation with neighboring Bangladesh became tense as they began searching for natural gas in a disputed block of the Bay of Bengal. 197. Controversy surrounding the Rohingya population also remains an issue between Bangladesh and Myanmar. 198. Myanmar's armed forces are known as the Tatmadaw, which numbers 488,000. The Tatmadaw comprises the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. The country ranked 12th in the world for its number of active troops in service, 38. The military is very influential in Myanmar, with all top cabinet and ministry posts usually held by military officials. Official figures for military spending are not available. Estimates vary widely because of uncertain exchange rates, but Myanmar's military forces' expenses are high. 199. Myanmar imports most of its weapons from Russia, Ukraine, China and India. Myanmar is building a research nuclear reactor near Pine Olwyn with help from Russia. It is one of the signatories of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Pact since 1992 and a member of the International Atomic Energy Agency (IAEA) since 1957. The military junta had informed the IAEA in September 2000 of its intention to construct the reactor 200-201 in 2010 as part of the leaked diplomatic cables. Myanmar was suspected of using North Korean construction teams to build a fortified surface-to-air missile facility 202 as of 2019. The United States Bureau of Arms Control assessed that Myanmar is not in violation of its obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but that the Myanmar government had a history of non-transparency on its nuclear programs and aims. 203. Until 2005, the United Nations General Assembly annually adopted a detailed resolution about the situation in Myanmar by consensus, 200 for 205, 206, 207. But in 2006 a divided United Nations General Assembly voted through a resolution that strongly called upon the government of Myanmar to end its systematic violations of human rights. 208. In January 2007, Russia and China vetoed a draft resolution before the United Nations Security Council 209 calling on the government of Myanmar to respect human rights and begin a democratic transition. South Africa also voted against the resolution. 210. Human rights and internal conflicts. Main articles: Human rights in Myanmar and internal conflict in Myanmar. This section may lend undue weight to certain ideas, incidents, or controversies. Please help improve it by rewriting it to create a more balanced presentation. Discuss and resolve this issue before removing this message. November 2020. Map of conflict zones in Myanmar. States and regions affected by fighting during and after 1995 are highlighted in yellow. There is consensus that the former military regime in Myanmar 1960 to 2010 was one of the world's most repressive and abusive regimes. 211-112 in November 2012. Samantha Power, Barack Obama's special assistant to the president on human rights, wrote on the White House blog that serious human rights abuses against civilians in several regions continue, including against women and children. 111. Members of the United Nations and major international human rights organizations have issued repeated and consistent reports of widespread and systematic human rights violations in Myanmar. The United Nations General Assembly has repeatedly 213 called on the Burmese military junta to respect human rights, and in November 2009 the General Assembly adopted a resolution strongly condemning the ongoing systematic violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms and calling on the Burmese military regime to take urgent measures to put an end to violations of international human rights and humanitarian law. 214. International human rights organizations including Human Rights Watch 215 and Amnesty International 216 have repeatedly documented and condemned widespread human rights violations in Myanmar. To Freedom in the World 2011 report by Freedom House notes, the military junta has suppressed nearly all basic rights and committed human rights abuses with impunity. In July 2013, the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners indicated that there were approximately 100 political prisoners being held in Burmese prisons. 217, 218, 219, 220 evidence gathered by a British researcher was published in 2005 regarding the extermination or Burmization of certain ethnic minorities, such as the Karen, Karenni and Shan. 221. My La Camp, Tak, Thailand. One of the largest of 9 UNHCR camps in Thailand. 222. Based on the evidence gathered by Amnesty, photographs and video of the ongoing armed conflict between the Myanmar military and the Arakan Army AA. Attacks escalated on civilians in Rakhine State. Ming Yu Ha, Amnesty International's Deputy Regional Director for Campaigns, said, "The UN Security Council must urgently refer the situation in Myanmar to the International Criminal Court." 223. The military is notorious for rampant use of sexual violence. 20. In November 2024, the ICC prosecutor Karim May Khan Casey filed an arrest warrant application of Senior General, Acting President, and Commander-in-Chief of the Myanmar Defense Services in applying for criminal responsibility for the crimes against humanity of deportation and persecution of the Rohingya, committed in Myanmar and in part in Bangladesh. 224. Genocide allegations, organ trading and human trafficking. Child soldiers have been a major issue in Myanmar. 225, with reports of children being sold into the military for as little as $40. The Burmese army and rebel groups have used child soldiers, though some efforts have been made to release them. The UN and other organizations have pressured the government to reform, but progress has been slow. 226. 227. The military takeover in 2021 worsened poverty in country, pushing people to extreme measures like illegal organ trade. Many Myanmar citizens sell their organs online for money, sometimes earning the equivalent of a 2-year salary, as financial desperation forces families into a cycle of selling body parts. 228. The Myanmar government has been alleged to have committed genocide against the Rohingya. The Rohingya people face severe persecution, denied citizenship and basic rights since 1982. Many have been expelled, making them one of the world's most persecuted minorities. 229. Government reforms. According to the crisis group, 230 since Myanmar transitioned to a new government in August 2011, the country's human rights record has been improving, previously giving Myanmar slowest rating of 7. The 2012 Freedom in the World report also notes improvement, giving Myanmar a 6 for improvements in civil liberties and political rights, the release of political prisoners, and the loosening of restrictions. 231. In 2013, Myanmar improved yet again, receiving a score of 5 in civil liberties and 6 in political freedoms. 232. The government has assembled a National Human Rights Commission that consists of 15 members from various backgrounds. 233. Several activists in exile, including the Aniant members, have returned to Myanmar after President Thein Sein's invitation to expatriates to return home to work for national development. 234. In an address to the United Nations Security Council on the 22nd of September 2011, Myanmar's Foreign Minister Wona Maumolwin confirmed the government's intention to release prisoners in the near future. 235. The government has also relaxed reporting laws, but these remain highly restrictive. In September 2011, several banned websites, including YouTube, Democratic Voice of Burma and Voice of America, were unblocked. 237. A 2011 report by the Hauser Center for Nonprofit Organizations found that, while contact with the Myanmar government was constrained by donor restrictions, international humanitarian non-governmental organizations and NGOs see opportunities for effective advocacy with government officials, especially at the local level. At the same time, international NGOs are mindful of the ethical quandary of how to work with the government without bolstering or appeasing it. 238. Following Thein Sein's first ever visit to the UK and a meeting with Prime Minister David Cameron, the Myanmar president declared that all of his nation's political prisoners will be released by the end of 2013, in addition to a statement of support for the well-being of the Rohingya Muslim community. In a speech at Chatham House, he revealed that we Myanmar government are reviewing all cases. I guarantee to you that by the end of this year, there will be no prisoners of conscience in Myanmar. 239. Homosexual acts are illegal in Myanmar and can be punishable by life imprisonment. 240-241. In 2016, Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi was accused of failing to protect Myanmar's Muslim minority. 240. Since August 2017, Doctors Without Borders have treated 113 Rohingya refugee females for sexual assault, with all but one describing military assailants. 243. Economy. Main article, Economy of Myanmar. This section needs to be updated. The reason given is, economic situation has changed since the 2021 Myanmar coup d'etat. Please help update this article to reflect recent events or newly available information. January 2025. Further information, Golden Triangle Southeast Asia, transport in Myanmar, and oil and gas industry in Myanmar. Myanmar's economy is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, with a nominal GDP of $76.09 billion United States dollars in 2019 and an estimated purchasing power adjusted GDP of $327.6 million United States dollars in 2017, according to the World Bank. 240. For improper synthesis, foreigners are able to legally lease but not own property. 245. In December 2014, Myanmar set up its first stock exchange, the Yangon Stock Exchange. 246. The informal economy's share in Myanmar is one of the biggest in the world and is closely linked to corruption, smuggling and illegal trade activities. 247-248. In addition, decades of civil war and unrest have contributed to Myanmar's current levels, poverty and lack of economic progress. Myanmar lacks adequate infrastructure. Goods travel primarily across the Thai border, where most illegal drugs are exported, and along the Irrawaddy River. 249. Notably, opium production in Myanmar is the world's second largest source of opium after Afghanistan, producing some 25% of the world's opium, forming part of the Golden Triangle. While opium poppy cultivation in Myanmar had declined year-on-year since 2015, cultivation area increased by 33%, totaling 40,100 hectares, alongside an 88% increase in yield potential to 790 tons in 2022, according to latest data from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime UNODC. Myanmar Opium Survey 2022, 250. With that said, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime UNODC has also warned that opium production in Myanmar may rise again if the economic crunch brought on by COVID-19 and the country's the 1st of February military coup persists, with significant public health and security consequences for much of Asia. 251. At the same time, the Golden Triangle, and specifically Shan State in Myanmar, is believed to be the largest methamphetamine-producing area in the world. The growing signs of an intensification of methamphetamine manufacturing activity within and around the Golden Triangle, and a corresponding decrease in the number of production facilities dismantled in other parts of the region, suggests that methamphetamine manufacture in East and Southeast Asia is now consolidated into the Lower Mekong region. 252 countries in East and Southeast Asia have collectively witnessed sustained increases in seizures of methamphetamine over the last decade, totaling over 171 tons and a record of over 1 billion methamphetamine tablets in 2021 according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. More than any other part of the world. 253. In April and May 2020, Myanmar authorities reported Asia's largest ever drug operation in Shan State, totaling what was believed to be 193 million methamphetamine tablets, hundreds of kilograms of crystal methamphetamine, as well as some heroin, and over 162,000 liters and 35.5 tons of drug precursors, as well as sophisticated production equipment and several staging and storage facilities. 254. Both China and India have attempted to strengthen ties with the government for economic benefit in the early 2010s. Many Western nations, including the United States and Canada, and the European Union, historically imposed investment and trade sanctions on Myanmar. The United States and European Union eased most of their sanctions in 2012. 255. From May 2012 to February 2013, the United States began to lift its economic sanctions on Myanmar in response to the historic reforms that have been taking place in that country. 256. Foreign investment comes primarily from China, Singapore, the Philippines, South Korea, India, and Thailand. 257. The military has stakes in some major industrial corporations of the country, from oil production and consumer goods to transportation and tourism. 258. 259. Economic history. The trains are relatively slow in Myanmar. The railway trip from Bagan to Mandalay takes about 7.5 hours, 179 kilometers, or 111 miles. Under the British administration, the people of Burma were at the bottom of the social hierarchy, with Europeans at the top, Indians, Chinese, and Christianized minorities in the middle, and Buddhist Burmese at the bottom. 260. Forcefully integrated into the world economy. Burma's economy grew by involving itself with extractive industries and cash crop agriculture. However, much of the wealth was concentrated in the hands of Europeans. The country became the world's largest exporter of rice, mainly to European markets, while other colonies, like India, suffered mass starvation. 261. Being a follower of free market principles, the British opened up the country to large-scale immigration, with Rangoon exceeding New York City as the greatest immigration port in the world in the 1920s. Historian Thant Myen Chu states, this was out of a total population of only 13 million. It was equivalent to the United Kingdom today taking 2 million people a year. By then, in most of Burma's largest cities, Rangoon, Akiap, Bassein and Moulmein, the Indian immigrants formed a majority of the population. The Burmese under British rule felt helpless and reacted with a racism that combined feelings of superiority and fear. 260. Crude oil production, an indigenous industry of Yangon, was taken over by the British and put under Burma oil monopoly. British Burma began exporting crude oil in 1853. 260. To European firms produced 75% of the world's teak. 37. The wealth was, however, mainly concentrated in the hands of Europeans. In the 1930s, agricultural production fell dramatically as international rice prices declined and did not recover for several decades. 263. During the Japanese invasion of Burma in World War II, the British followed a scorched earth policy. They destroy major government buildings, oil wells and mines that developed for tungsten, machi, tin, lead and silver to keep them from the Japanese. Myanmar was bombed extensively by the Allies, citation needed. After independence, the country was in ruins with its major infrastructure completely destroyed. With the loss of India, Burma lost relevance and obtained independence from the British. After a parliamentary government was formed in 1948, Prime Minister U Nu embarked upon a policy of nationalization and the state was declared the owner of all of the land in Burma. The government tried to implement an 8-year plan partly financed by injecting money into the economy, but this caused inflation to rise. 264. The 1962 coup d'etat was followed by an economic scheme called the Burmese Way to Socialism, a plan to nationalize all industries, with the exception of agriculture. While the economy continued to grow at a slow rate, the country eschewed a Western-oriented development model, and by the 1980s, was left behind capitalist powerhouses like Singapore, which were integrated with Western economies. 265. 91. Myanmar asked for admittance to a least developed country status in 1987 to receive debt relief. 266. Agriculture. Rice is Myanmar's largest agricultural product. Further information. Agriculture in Myanmar. The major agricultural product is rice, which covers about 60% of the country's total cultivated land area. Rice accounts for 97% of total food grain production by weight. Through collaboration with the International Rice Research Institute, 50 modern rice varieties were released in the country between 1966 and 1997, helping increase national rice production to 14 million tons in 1987 and to 19 million tons in 1996. By 1988, modern varieties were planted on half of the country's ricelands, including 98% of the irrigated areas. 267. In 2008, rice production was estimated at 50 million tons. 268. Extractive industries. Myanmar produces precious stones such as rubies, sapphires, pearls, and jade. Rubies are the biggest earner. 90% of the world's rubies come from the country, whose red stones are prized for their purity and hue. Thailand buys the majority of the country's gems. Myanmar's Valley of Rubies, the mountainous Mogok area, 200 kilometers, 120 miles north of Mandalay, is noted for its rare pigeon's blood rubies and blue sapphires. 269. Many U.S. and European jewelry companies, including Bulgari, Tiffany and Cartier, refuse to import these stones based on reports of deplorable working. Human Rights Watch has encouraged a complete ban on the purchase of Burmese gems based on these reports and because nearly all profits go to the ruling junta, as the majority of mining activity in the country is government-run. 270. The government of Myanmar controls the gem trade by direct ownership or by joint ventures with private owners of mines. 271. Rare earth elements are also a significant export, as Myanmar supplies around 10% of the world's rare earths. 270. To conflict in Kachin State has threatened the operations of its mines as of February 2021. 273. 274. Other industries include agricultural goods, textiles, wood products, construction materials, gems, metals, oil and natural gas. Myanmar Engineering Society has identified at least 39 locations capable of geothermal power production, and some of these hydrothermal reservoirs are quite close to Yangon, which is a significant underutilized resource for electrical production. 275. Tourism. Main article. Tourism in Myanmar. The government receives a significant percentage of the income of private sector tourism services. 276. The most popular available tourist destinations in Myanmar include big cities such as Yangon and Mandalay, religious sites in Mon State, Pindaya, Bago and Hpa, and nature trails in Inal Lake, Kenton, Pyu Tau, Pine-Olwyn, ancient cities such as Bagan and Maracu, as well as beaches in Nabule, 277 Ngapali, Nguisan, and Mergui, 278. Nevertheless, much of the country is off-limits to tourists, and interactions between foreigners and the people of Myanmar, particularly in the border regions, are subject to police scrutiny. They are not to discuss politics with foreigners, under penalty of imprisonment, and, in 2001, the Myanmar Tourism Promotion Board issued an order for local officials to protect tourists and limit unnecessary contact between foreigners and ordinary Burmese people. 279. The most common way for travelers to enter the country is by air. 280. According to the website Lonely Planet, getting into Myanmar is problematic. No bus or train service connects Myanmar with another country, nor can you travel by car or motorcycle across the border. You must walk across. They further state that it is not possible for foreigners to go to from Myanmar by sea or river. 280. There are a few border crossings that allow the passage of private vehicles, such as the border between Really China to Muesi, the border between Thiki Myanmar and Phnom Ron Thailand, the most direct border between Dawei and Kanchanaburi, and the border between Irrawaddy and Mae Sot, Thailand. At least one tourist company has successfully run commercial overland routes through these borders since 2013. 281. Flights are available from most countries, though direct flights are limited to mainly Thai and other ASEAN airlines. According to 11 magazine, in the past, there were only 15 international airlines and increasing numbers of airlines have begun launching direct flights from Japan, Qatar, Taiwan, South Korea, Germany and Singapore. 282. The provisional results of the 2014 Myanmar census showed that the total population was 51,419,420. 285. This figure includes an estimated 1,206,353 persons in parts of northern Rakhine State, Kachin State, and Kayin State who were not counted. 286 people who were out of the country at the time of the census are not included in these figures. There are over 600,000 registered migrant workers from Myanmar in Thailand, and millions more work illegally. Burmese citizens account for 80% of all migrant workers in Thailand. 287. At the beginning of the 20th century, Burma's population was approximately 10 million. 288. The national population density is 76 per square kilometer to 100 square mi. Among the lowest in Southeast Asia. Myanmar's fertility rate in 2011 was 2.23, slightly above the replacement level 289, and low compared to Southeast Asian countries of similar economic standing. 289. There has been a significant decline in fertility in the 2000s from a rate of 4.7 children per woman in 1983, down to 2.4 in 2001, despite the absence of any national population policy. 289. 209. The fertility rate is much lower in urban areas. The relatively rapid decline in fertility is attributed to several factors, including extreme delays in marriage almost unparalleled among developing countries in the region, the prevalence of illegal abortions, and the high proportion of single, unmarried women of reproductive age, with 25.9% of women aged 30 to 34 and 33.1% of men and women aged 25 to 30 for being single. 291. 292. These patterns stem from economic dynamics, including high income inequality, which results in residents of reproductive age opting for delay of marriage and family building in favor of attempting to find employment and establish some form of wealth. 291. The average age of marriage in Myanmar is 27.5 for men, 26.4 for women. 291. 292. Myanmar is ethnically diverse. The government recognizes 135 distinct ethnic groups. There are at least 108 different ethno-linguistic groups in Myanmar, consisting mainly of distinct Tibeto-Burman peoples, but with sizable populations of Tibeto, Munmin, and Austroasiatic Mon Khmer peoples. 293. Ethnic identity in modern-day Myanmar has been significantly shaped by British colonial rule, Christian missionaries, and decolonization in the post-independence era. To this day, the Burmese language does not have precise terminology that distinguishes the European concepts of race and ethnicity. The term Lumayo, lit. Type of person, can reference race, ethnicity, and religion. 294. For instance, many Bamar self-identify as members of the Buddhist Lumayo or the Myanmar Lumayo, which has posed a significant challenge for census takers. 295. The Bamar form an estimated 68% of the population. 296. Irrelevant citation. 10% of the population are Shan. 296. The Kayin make up 7% of the population. 296. The Rakhine people constitute 4% of the population. Overseas Chinese form approximately 3% of the population. 297 Myanmar's ethnic minority groups prefer the term ethnic nationality over ethnic minority, as the term minority furthers their sense of insecurity in the face of what is often described as Burmanization, the proliferation and domination of the dominant Bamar culture over minority cultures. Mon, who form 2% of the population, are ethno-linguistically related to the Khmer. 296 overseas Indians are 2%. 296. The remainder are Kachin, Shin, Rohingya, Anglo-Indians, Gurkha, Nepali and other ethnic minorities. Included in this group are the Anglo-Burmese. Once forming a large and influential community, the Anglo-Burmese left the country in steady streams from 1958 onwards, principally to Australia and the United Kingdom. It is estimated that 52,000 Anglo-Burmese remain in Myanmar. As of 2009, 110,000 Burmese refugees were living in refugee camps in Thailand. 298 refugee camps exist along Indian, Bangladeshi and Thai borders, while several thousand are in Malaysia. Conservative estimates state that there are over 295,800 minority refugees from Myanmar, with the majority being Rohingya. Karen and Karenni are principally located along the Thai-Myanmar border. 299. There are 9 permanent refugee camps along the Thai-Myanmar border, most of which were established in the mid-1980s. The refugee camps are under the care of the Thai-Burma Border Consortium (TBBC). Since 2006, 300 over 55,000 Burmese refugees have been resettled in the United States. 301. The persecution of Burmese Indians, Burmese Chinese and other ethnic groups after the military coup headed by General Anyone in 1960 led to the expulsion or emigration of 300,000. They migrated to escape racial discrimination and the wholesale nationalization of private enterprise that took place in 1964. 303. The Anglo-Burmese at this time either fled the country or changed their names and blended in with the broader Burmese society. Many Rohingya Muslims have fled Myanmar. Many refugees headed to neighboring Bangladesh, including 200,000 in 1978 as a result of the King Dragon operation in Arakan. 300 for 250,000 more left in 1991. 305. Since August 2017, an estimated 23,000 to 43,700 Rohingya have been killed. 307 in the ongoing Rohingya genocide, and another 730,000 have fled to Bangladesh. 308. Religion. Main article, Religion in Myanmar. Religion in Myanmar. Religion percentage, Buddhism. 87.9%. Christianity. 6.2%. Islam. 4.3%. Hinduism. 0.5%. Tribal religions. 0.8%. Other. 0.2%. No religion. 0.1%. Source: 2014 Myanmar Census. Many religions are practiced in Myanmar. Religious edifices and orders have been in existence for many years. The Christian and Muslim populations do, however, face religious persecution, and it is hard, if not impossible, for non-Buddhists to join the army or get government jobs. The main route to success in the country. 311. Such persecution and targeting of civilians is particularly notable in eastern Myanmar, where over 3,000 villages have been destroyed in the past 10 years. 312, 313, 314 more, and 200,000 Muslims have fled to Bangladesh by 2007 to escape persecution. 315, 316. Praying Buddhist monks in Shwedagon Pagoda. A large majority of the population practices Buddhism. Estimates range from 80% 317 to 89%, 308. According to the 2014 Myanmar census, 87.9% of the population identifies as Buddhists. 320. Theravada Buddhism is the most widespread. 318. There are some 500,000 Buddhist monks and 75,000 nuns in this country. Of 50,321 other religions are practiced largely without obstruction, with the notable exception of some religious minorities such as the Rohingya people, who have continued to have their citizenship status denied and treated as illegal immigrants instead. 322. And Christians in Chin State. 323. According to 2014 census, 6.2% of the population identifies as Christian. 4.3% as Muslim, 0.8% as followers of tribal religions, 0.5% as Hindus, 0.2% as followers of other religions, and 0.1% follow no religion. According to the 2010 estimates of the Pyu Research Center, 7% of the population is Christian, 4% is Muslim, 1% follows traditional animistic beliefs, and 2% follow other religions, including Mahayana Buddhism, Hinduism, and East Asian religions. 323,296. Jehovah's Witnesses have been present since 1914. 324 and have about 80 congregations around the country and a branch office in Yangon, publishing in 16 languages. 325. A tiny Jewish community in Yangon had a synagogue but no resident rabbi. 326. Although Hinduism is practiced by 0.5% of the population, it was a major religion in Myanmar's past. 327. 328. Burmese folk religion is practiced by many Bamars alongside Buddhism. Health. Main article. Health in Myanmar. The general state of health care in Myanmar is poor. The government spends anywhere from 0.5% to 3% of the country's GDP on health care, consistently ranking among the lowest in the world. 329. 330. Although health care is nominally free, in reality, patients have to pay for medicine and treatment, even in public clinics and hospitals. Public hospitals lack many of the basic facilities and equipment. The 2010 maternal mortality rate per 100,000 births for Myanmar is 240. This is compared with 219.3 in 2008 and 662 in 1990. The under 5 mortality rate per 1,000 births is 73, and the neonatal mortality as a percentage of under 5's mortality is 47. According to Doctors Without Borders, 25,000 Burmese AIDS patients died in 2007, deaths that could largely have been prevented by antiretroviral therapy drugs and proper treatment. 331. HIV. AIDS, recognized as a disease of concern by the Myanmar Ministry of Health, is most prevalent among sex workers and intravenous drug users. In 2005, the estimated adult HIV prevalence rate in Myanmar was 1.3%, 200,000 to 570,000 people. According to an AIDS, and early indicators of any progress against the HIV epidemic are inconsistent. 330 to 333. 334. However, the National AIDS Program Myanmar found that 32% of sex workers and 43% of intravenous drug users in Myanmar had HIV. 334. Education. Main article. Education in Myanmar. Students on their way to school, Kalamyo, Sagaing Region, Myanmar. According to the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, Myanmar's official literacy rate as of 2000 was 90%. 335. Historically, Myanmar has had high literacy rates. The educational system of Myanmar is operated by the government agency, the Ministry of Education. The education system is based on the United Kingdom system after nearly a century of British and Christian presences in Myanmar. Nearly all schools are government-operated, but there has been an increase in privately funded English-language schools in the early 21st century. Schooling is compulsory until the end of elementary school, approximately 9 years old, while the compulsory schooling age is 15 or 16 at international level. There are 101 universities, 12 institutes, 9 degree colleges and 24 colleges in Myanmar. A total of 146 higher education institutions, 336. There are 10 technical training schools, 23 nursing training schools, 1 sport academy and 20 midwifery schools. There are 4 international schools acknowledged by WASC and College Board: the International School Yangon, Myanmar International School, Yangon International School, and International School of Myanmar in Yangon. Myanmar was ranked 125th in the Global Innovation Index in 2024. 337. Culture. Main article. Culture of Myanmar. Burmese Kanai dance. A diverse range of indigenous cultures exist in Myanmar, with majority culture primarily Buddhist and Bamar. Bamar culture has been influenced by the cultures of neighboring countries, manifested in its language, cuisine, music, dance and theater. The arts, particularly literature, have historically been influenced by the local form of Theravada Buddhism. Considered the national epic of Myanmar, the Yamazatta, an adaptation of India's Ramayana, has been influenced greatly by Thai, Mon, and Indian versions of the play. 340 for Buddhism is practiced along with Nat worship, which involves elaborate rituals to propitiate one from a pantheon of 37 Nats. 345-346. A Buddhist Shinbyu ceremony in Mandalay. In a traditional village, the monastery is the center of cultural life. Monks are venerated and supported by the lay people. An initiation ceremony called Shinbyu is the most important coming-of-age events for a Buddha, during which he enters the monastery for a short time. 347. All male children in Buddhist families are encouraged to be a novice beginner for Buddhism before the age of 20 and to be a monk after the age of 20. Girls have ear-piercing ceremonies at the same time. 347. Burmese culture is most evident in villages where local festivals are held throughout the year, the most important being the Pagoda Festival. 348-349. Many villages have a guardian nat, and superstition and taboos are commonplace. An Arakan Rakhine girl pours water at revelers during the Burmese New Year Thingin Water Festival in Yangon. British colonial rule introduced Western elements of culture to Myanmar. Myanmar's education system is modeled after that of the United Kingdom. Colonial architectural influences are most evident in major cities such as Yangon. 350. Many ethnic minorities, particularly the Karen, in the southeast and the Kachin and Chin who populate the north and northeast, practice Christianity. 351. According to the World Factbook, the Burman population is 68% and the ethnic groups constitute 32%. In contrast, the exiled leaders and organizations claim the country is 40% ethnic. Cuisine. Main article. Burmese cuisine. Burmese cuisine is characterized by extensive use of fish products such as fish sauce, ngapi fermented seafood, and dried prawn. Mohinge is the traditional breakfast dish and is Myanmar's national dish. Seafood is a common ingredient in coastal cities, while meat and poultry are more commonly used in landlocked cities like Mandalay. Freshwater fish and shrimp have been incorporated into inland cooking as a primary source of protein and are used in a variety of ways: fresh, salted whole or filleted, salted and dry, made into a salty paste, or Burmese cuisine also includes a variety of salads of folk, centered on one major ingredient, ranging from starches like rice, wheat and rice noodles, glass noodles and vermicelli, to potato, ginger, tomato, kaffir lime, long bean, and lopet pickled tea leaves. Sport. Main article. Sport in Myanmar. Delefway, Bando, Danshe, and Pongi Thang martial arts and Chinlone are traditional sports in Myanmar. 350. To football is played all over the country, even in villages, and its national team is ruled by the Myanmar Football Federation. The 2013 Southeast Asian Games took place in Naypyidaw, Yangon, Mandalay and Nguesong Beach in December, representing the third occasion that the event has been staged in Myanmar. Myanmar previously hosted the Games in 1961 and 1969. 353. Art. Main articles. Art of Myanmar and Myanmar architecture. Burmese traditional art concepts are popular and respected by the Burmese people and people from abroad. Burmese contemporary art has developed quite rapidly on its own terms. Artists born after the 1980s have had greater chances of art practice outside the country. One of the first to study Western art was Ba Nyan. Later on, most young children learned the concepts from them. Some well-known contemporary artists are Lun Jiao, Onkiafthet, Mtpa Myant, Myant Sway, Min Myan, On Myant, Kin Maunyin, Popoan Zav Zavong. Media and communications. Main article. Media of Myanmar. Because of Myanmar's political climate, there are not many media companies in relation to the country's population. Some are privately owned. The Burmese government announced on the 20th of August 2012 that it would stop censoring media before publication. Following the announcement, newspapers and other outlets no longer required approved by state censors. However, journalists in the country can still face consequences for what they write and say. 354. In April 2013, international media reports were published to relay the enactment of the Media Liberalization reforms that we announced in August 2012. For the first time in numerous decades, the publication of privately owned newspapers commenced in the country. 355. Internet. Main article. Internet in Myanmar. Khan women in a village near Anil Lake. 2010. Internet use is estimated to be relatively low compared to other countries. 356. 357. Myanmar's internet used to be subject to censorship, and authorities view emails and posts on internet blogs until 2012, and the government removed media censorship. During the strict censorship days, activity at internet cafes was regulated, and one blogger named Zarganar was sentenced to prison for publishing a video of destruction caused by Cyclone Nargis in 2008. Zarganar was released in October 2011. In regards to communications infrastructure, Myanmar is the last-ranked Asian country in the World Economic Forum's Networked Readiness Index (NRI), an indicator for determining the development level of a country's information and communication technologies. With 139 countries reported on, Myanmar ranked number 133 overall in the 2016 NRI ranking. 358. Film. Main article. Cinema of Myanmar. Myanmar's first film was a documentary, The Funeral of Tun Shin, a leading politician of the 1910s who campaigned for Burmese independence in London. The first Burmese silent film, Maide Enituya Love and Liquor, in 1920, which proved a major success despite its poor quality. During the 1920s and 1930s, many Burmese-owned film companies made and produced several films. The first Burmese sound film was produced in 1932 in Bombay, India, with the title "And We Pay Lo Maya Money Can't Buy It." After World War II, Burmese cinema continued to address political themes. Many of the films produced in the early Cold War era had a strong propaganda element. In the era that followed the political events of 1988, the film industry has been increasingly controlled by the government. Film stars who had been involved in the political activities were banned from appearing in films. The government issues strict rules on censorship and largely determines who produces films, as well as who gets Academy Awards. 359. Over the years, the movie industry has also shifted to producing many lower-budget direct-to-video films. Most of the movies produced nowadays are comedies. 360. In 2008, only 12 films worthy of being considered for an Academy Award were made, although at least 800 VC discs were produced. 361. Myanmar is the primary subject of a 2007 graphic novel titled Chroniques Burmans by Quebecois author and animator Guy Delisle. The graphic novel was translated into English under the title Burma Chronicles in 2008. In 2009, a documentary about Burmese video journalists called Burma VJ was released. 362. This film was nominated for Best Documentary Feature at the 2010 Academy Awards. 363. The Lady had its world premiere on the 12th of September 2011 at the 36th Toronto International Film Festival.